All right, we're going to look at the Virginia colony today. And as you know, the Virginia colony was settled in 1607. It wasn't called the Virginia colony back then. At that time, it was just Jamestown, named after King James. And so it's our oldest colony. It was the first one settled by the English in the New World, and also the first one in North America by the English. There was an earlier colony by the Spanish in Florida that was also successful, but this is the first permanent English colony in North America. All right, so we're not going to spend too much time talking about Jamestown, but some of the key people here, you'll notice there's some dots underneath their name. We'll talk about just a real quick review of the key people in Virginia, early days of Virginia, which was the settling of Jamestown. John Smith is one of those. He kind of takes over as a leader, and he doesn't like take over. He was an appointed leader, but he kind of shows his value as a leader and really becomes one of the key ones to help keep this colony surviving. One of the ways he does that is he no longer makes bad deals with the Native Americans like some of the previous leaders had done. He asserts some military strength, and all of a sudden the Native Americans start to respect the colonists a little better and also make better trade deals. Because if they didn't, then they would lose. He may send some people out there and actually attack, and so they all of a sudden have some better relations, even though it's based on military power instead of just everybody's nice and friendly to each other. John Rolfe is important for a couple of big reasons. One, he brings tobacco. He brings not tobacco. Tobacco was already there, but he brings a new variety of tobacco that he got from Spain, and it's a much more, he basically steals it. We're not exactly sure how he gets it, but it was definitely not supposed to be, according to the Spanish, wasn't supposed to be bringing it there, and he does, and all of a sudden now this tobacco sells really well, and it really in a lot of ways saves the economy in Virginia. Pocahontas marries John Rolfe. She is the daughter of the chief of the Powhatan people, and she marries John Rolfe, and that ends up being kind of basically a de facto agreement or a treaty between the English, and the Powhatan people. Unfortunately for Pocahontas and for our relations between these two groups is she dies pretty early, just a few years after being married, and so with that that de facto treaty is kind of no longer in, and there's continues to be a great deal of animosity between the colonists and the Native Americans. The other thing she does, or may have done, is perhaps she saved John Smith's life. It may have been more of a ritual, which was one of the things we talked about in class, where she was really playing out a role that she was supposed to have. We're not 100% sure on that, but very likely that is what was going on. And John Smith, though, didn't necessarily recognize that. And so that's a little bit about these three. And then another big thing that kind of was going on that happens is the Virginia House of Burgesses, and that is that first meets in 1619. And so it is, and the key thing here is that it was House of Burgesses. Burgesses is really just an old word for representatives. And so it was the Virginia House of Representatives. So it's a legislative body. It's a legislatures. Those are people that make laws. And it's representative. Now, it's not everybody that gets to vote in this. It's only the wealthy, the landowners that are getting to vote. But it is the beginning of representative government in the colonies. So one of the big things here about Virginia is understanding the Headright System. And what they want to do is they want people to move to Virginia. They're having a lot of trouble. For years and years, people come, but it's because of all the problems with Native Americans. There's death, there's disease, and they're just having a hard time getting this colony really going. And what they set up is called the Headright System, and basically each head of household received 50 acres per person that they brought, which would include their own family members and servants, indentured servants, or slaves. And so what ends up happening is you have these really large landowners that have huge tracts of land because they bring so many people, so many servants, that they're getting thousands and thousands of acres. They may even be purchasing and they're getting what is some of the best land in what's known as the Tidewater region, which is really this darkest green area right here. Okay, that's the Tidewater, and they are it's the best for many reasons. One of the reasons is it's close proximity to the coast, and so that it's not too difficult to get your tobacco to the coast and to the ships, the trading centers, and so that was key. What ends up happening then is, as these indentured servants who serve for at least usually 7 years, sometimes a little less, sometimes longer, depending upon different situations, and when they gain their freedom, they're supposed to be given certain things, whether it's money and other things like that, some supplies, and in some cases maybe even land. But they're going to have to head out west in this area. And this area is known as the back country here, kind of on the eastern edge of the Appalachian Mountains. And this is not bad soil necessarily, but it's much further from the coast and much more difficult to get your produce out back east where you can trade. And we'll talk about a little bit more about that in the next slide. The other thing, though, here is in this region you're a lot closer to Native Americans and all the conflict that comes with that. And so the poor are looking, these former indentured servants, they're looking for protection from Native Americans. Meanwhile, those back east are safer from Native American attack and not interested in using their tax dollars to defend the backcountry. Well, these are the ones that get to vote, and they don't need the protection, so they don't vote to pay for militia to be sent out west where they can be, where they're defending other people. And so that causes some problems, mainly helps to be the causes of Bacon's rebellion. And so if we look at the geography and climate, which has a great impact on the economy of Virginia, what we see here is it's got long, hot summers, which means long growing season. Fertile soil, especially in the Tidewater region, but other places as well. And what happens is, after John Rolfe, tobacco becomes the crop of the Virginia colony and the northern parts of North Carolina and Maryland. It is the crop. So much so that they actually have to pass laws saying, hey, you've got to grow at least 1 or 2 acres of corn, because when tobacco prices drop, all of a sudden people are starving because they don't have any food. They haven't grown any food, and their prices are so low they can't afford to buy anything, buy enough food to feed people. And so they start making people, hey, if you're going to have these farms and it's tobacco, you're going to have to also grow some other crops like corn, so that we've got the food to sustain ourselves when tobacco prices drop. The backcountry, in those areas, they may grow some tobacco, but it's going to be on a much smaller scale, and they're growing a greater variety of crops, corn, but many other different things too. It's going to be much more of a subsistence level, and until we have the Great Wagon Road. And you see this red road, so people are going to be living all along here in this area, and this Great Wagon Road going up to Philadelphia, which is going to be a major trading center, that kind of opens things up, and all of a sudden they start to plant a few more cash crops like tobacco, but other things really, and wheat is the big one. Wheat is one of the major crops of this region, of the back country. And so this part of the territory is they're smaller farms, they're poor people. They may not necessarily all be really poor, but they are not the big, large, huge plantations that we have close to the coastal region and the Tidewater region. And that brings us to what is the plantation economy. Well, the plantation economy, as I said last slide, large land holdings with hundreds of slaves. Some of these plantations, thousands of acres, and literally hundreds and hundreds of slaves. Smaller plantations exist, still maybe 1,000 acres or things like that, but maybe less than 200 slaves, just kind of depending upon the size of the plantation and how much is being used. And these plantations, it's almost exclusively tobacco by comparison to the size of the plantation. You know, they may have an orchard, they may have gardens and things like that, but that's all really fairly small scale The economy is a tobacco economy. As a matter of fact, Virginia's money, that was their money. That's what they used for money. They had so little gold and silver there. Tobacco was the money of Virginia colony for many, many years. So it's very much a monoculture, almost one major agricultural thing that is produced, and that's tobacco. So it's the key to understanding Virginia. A couple other quick things about tobacco. It uses up the soil really quickly. And so what ends up happening is people plant tobacco, the soil gets used up, and they start moving west and continue to move. And so you continue to have conflict with Native Americans over time because more and more land is needed. So that's a quick overview of the Virginia colony, some of the key things that you need to know about it.